Welcome to the conference of the movement, com26v.com. Today is November 19. We've been broadcasting for around 10 to 11 days now. And we're talking about the creating of the blueprint for the future of humanity, part 1. And tomorrow we have the part 2. And this is very important while creating the blueprint for humanity is that the blueprint is great, but also another important thing Humphrey mentioned is that the safeguards. How could we have safeguards to the blueprint so it's not taken by dictators or people who try to dominate the blueprint or the Constitution? How do we create safeguards that will protect the future generations when we're not around? So we have Humphrey here and also Enrico Melson, and they could each introduce themselves, and then we can go further and they could discuss in deeper detail.
Great. Hello, everyone. This is Humphrey Angelus. Definitely a very important topic because the intention is to bring in, a lot of different cultures and beliefs and the history behind each of the tribes. We all have our own sacred practices and so forth. The significance of this, though, is that we do want to meet halfway, a commonality between us that will allow us to really work together as a collective. And so the vision that David had in regards to formulating an entity like the UN, which is a collective nations, from all over the world, we can create these safeguards so that we can prevent certain actions and that would create more separation, but to really foster something that would allow us to work together effectively, a stronger cohesion as time moves forward, and allowing the building of trust among the different tribes and nations that are coming in to step in. So I believe there's also a constitution, right, David, that is being created?
Yes, actually, there's two constitutions. Number one, our Mother Earth Constitution, Constitution for the Earth, and a secondary constitution, the Constitution for the Free Nations. They are symbiotic, that work with each other, but there's two constitutions.
Right. And because of the significance, thank you, David, for the significance of the safeguards, we are also intending on creating a separate conference specifically for the safeguards and also what we call onboarding. And this is to allow everyone that is stepping into the space that is, from the different nations and tribes to know exactly what the responsibilities are, stepping into the place and space of this co-creative arrangement, because it will allow us to work together again in with the responsibility per individual, per tribe, to know what their responsibilities are. And this is really critical to maintain awareness, order, respect, and truly carry over the intention, passing on to our communities and also to our, to the next generations to come. So again, we are planning that other conference specifically for safeguards and the onboarding, separate, a completely separate time. So we will just do a brief overview at this time, and then somewhere, just to let you guys know, somewhere halfway point, I'm probably gonna go off visual, so I'll still be on the call. So if any questions, I'll still be able to take some calls. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Dr. Melson?
Always.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, first of all, I want to thank you, David and Gail and Alice and all of the team for this great effort, ongoing effort of producing this Life Hope series and this meta project to help us usher in a blueprint for the future on the planet. And so it's also a great honor just even being invited to witness the process, let alone have the opportunity to participate and offer some perspective here. We have had conversations ongoing for quite a number of years, Brother Humphrey and myself, along with other teams, about issues related to an eventual massive dispersion and distribution or redistribution of global resources, be they financial resources and pretty much any other major type of resources that are necessary for sustainment and upliftment of quality of life on the planet. And that issue has always come as to who and how decisions are made with respect to this distribution, redistribution, generating of uh, the new economies, and not simply the financial economies, but all kinds of other economies of scale and economies of paradigms even. So this certainly is no different from that thematically. This is intended to be, in certain ways, a culmination of nearly all of those perspectives and all of those inputs on a global scale. So rather than considering starting at a local level per se and trying to incrementalize a process and learn along the way, you are offering a global approach. And therefore, we're jumping from, almost barely out of the starting blocks to, in excess of 100 miles an hour in what is intended to be a relatively few steps. And so from that process, with that kind of acceleration, that kind of introduction onto the global scene, there is a overriding mandate for levels of accountability, accountancy, responsibility, uh, and safeguarding. So it's in light of that, it's in that spirit that we had proposed, particularly under Brother Humphrey's leadership, we had proposed uh, this discussion, recognizing at the same time it's only a minimalist intro into what is a vast subject. And that is why we also recognize the need to have a further, much more extensive and in-depth, comprehensive discussion in an upcoming conference that we will be arranging. So thank you for that. I know you were asking a little bit about our backgrounds per se, but we're citizens of the planet and the universe.
Right.
Thank you. Just to give an example of safeguards, we've often seen example the United Nations, the Security Council. There's a lot of breakdowns in the Security Councils where resolutions are completely blocked and they're infighting of each other and doesn't get implemented or things like that. When we're talking about safeguards, these are some of the safeguards that has to be built in the front, built into from the beginning to prevent those issues from happening. Is that what we're saying about safeguards?
Correct. David, it is part of the intention. So for instance, we're looking at financial sector. On the financial sector, you need to have safeguards. You need to have clear accountability and rules of distribution per individual, per tribe. And how do you operate with the everything from the release of funds to distribution of funds, to utilization of funds. The safeguards would be means to create parameters on each individual to have the responsibility, the conscious responsibility to utilize these resources, uh, really to not to create further separation, but to also to utilize that towards the general intention of each steward, caretaker, uh, father, member of society, to utilize that resources to betterment and to communicate and build with the community. We don't want the funds to be utilized for further separation from another tribe, utilizing and purchasing the resource to create more you know fighting between tribes. We want to create those safeguards so that there are some forms of understanding that those things are not going to be used for certain things, right? So those are the types of safeguards we're talking about. It could be used in data. It could be looked at in use of in environments such as we don't want to do discrimination, of any sort. Those things, although understood, will still need to be written in a written format so that people will understand what the parameters are that we will operate in. No guesswork, because we are coming from different belief system. um, one areas might operate in one type of governance and another operate in a completely different governance, and that's what they're used to. We were not going to make any assumptions. So there will be a commonality among all the people that are coming into the space and agreement under that constitution.
Thank you
like
so
to
much. Yeah, I like that also.
I'd like to add just a little bit more to what Brother Humphrey is elaborating on. Sometimes we can reflect on some of the lessons, some of the hard lessons of human history. We know that practically every totalitarian, every dictatorial, every fascistic, corrupt society has some kind of roots in benevolence, uh, some kind of roots in an idealistic, maybe even a utopian kind of projection offered, at least, whether it was ever intended sincerely or it was just a big con job, and the wool pulled over the eyes of the people. Those are variations over time. But we also know that there has been always this tendency in the evolution of human society that really, really good intentions don't always mature into a total fruition, a total flowering that remains consistent with the founding ideals. So that isn't implicitly accusatory. It is not at all. It is not pessimistic. It is not skepticism. It is responsibility of perspective. And so, as we are really talking about what are safeguards, there are safeguards that are promotive of the retention and the expansion of the foundational principles that they operationalize in ways such that we can understand that the principles of equity, the principles of true sharing, and the principles of participation, etc., of sovereignty, that these principles are actually going to be consistently evident. They are going to be reproducible. They're going to be self-sustaining. They're going to be expansile. So safeguards are important for that because we also know that as this agenda is moving forward, it is also moving forward in the overall context of a global environment that is strongly pushing back, a global environment that has strongly embedded values of greed, of corruption, of domination, of deception, um, of control, these kinds of things. And so we also know that as we get to a point where we're able to begin the actual process of the distribution and the redistribution of resources on a planetary scale, that there has to be enough in place to assure that that momentum can be sustainable and not become susceptible to the countervailing influences through the incumbent societal structures, and particularly the concentrations of power, which seem which see and would vigorously and voraciously go about the pursuit, again, of their own self-interest and engage in processes of sabotage internally, even to those who are well intended to manifest this particular vision for the planet. So again, it's not simply looking at things from a rather simplistic or even a limited perspective. It's recognizing that this is inseminating, this is catalyzing a global evolutionary consciousness expansion process. And as that is taking place, that means this is indeed the greatest spiritual evolution on the planet to date. And when we are recognizing that as evolution and revolution, then the level of responsibility that we must address cannot be minimized. And so it's essential to look at what are the existing models that are out there, United Nations, etc. Look at international agreements, look at the legal histories of treaties, etc., even to question from an expansion perspective the very principles of such constructs, even as democracy. There are so many things that we take for granted as elevated values constructs. That doesn't mean they are necessarily understood and internalized and experienced consistently across the planet. So safeguarding indigenous rights, for example, safeguarding the sovereignties of people who hold different zeitgeists, different understandings of some of these basic principles of human-human interaction, human nature interactions, the rights of nature that supersede humanity's concerns, etc. All of these things require this kind of inventory of safeguards for discussion and for a really vigorous exploration that truly involves the multitudes of perspectives.
That's great. Thank you. So yeah, because of the number of people and the intention is global. We are part of the conversations between myself and Dr. Melson is that we want to really invite participation from the different tribes and nations to communicate and reach out to us. We're planning on creating a group. So if you can actually communicate and reach out, we would like to continue the conversation, get really the insight and get the cohesive communication between all the different participants to in preparation for the actual conference, so that it's not just going to be from us, it's going to be from the collective, knowledge, wisdom that flows through, each individual that feels called to please invite yourself into the space so that we can co-create this intention together. So it'll be great.
Yes, thank you so much, Humphrey and Dr. Melson, for taking this on. The safeguards is so important, is because we're seeing breakdowns because people have not set their foundations properly. Before we can build a house, we have to have proper foundations laid down before we start building the house. If the foundations have not been laid down properly, we build the house, entire house is collapsed. So you can see that in a lot of institutions, including our current banking system, the United Nations itself, political systems, social system, they're all crumbling before our eyes. The coronavirus, it has revealed that our system cannot operate as it is. Entire economies are on the brink of economic collapse around the world. Not only economic collapse, the social collapse in protests and violence and everything, that because there might not be food around because the system is created such that money is needed to create food and so on. And if you, even though there's a lot of food on the shelf, you don't have the money to buy it. So it's a system that that can can be a lot of chaos that will be happening. But we are preparing for that next shift, which is blueprint and the implementation of it. That was going to, if there's a shift that happened, definitely there's going to be a shift that's happening. Is that we'll step into a new world because it's just like on your computer. You have Windows 95 is not only functioning a bunch of programs you put in your computer. It pops up and says that you have to upgrade. What we're doing is upgrading the entire operating system on the planet that allows the indigenous people to thrive, but not only indigenous people, because everybody's indigenous of planet Earth to thrive also. Is that right? What you're saying, Humphrey? Or?
Oh, absolutely. We want to look at all the pillars of society, right? We're talking about really aligning with what separated humanity now is the lacking or not recognizing the connection that is not necessarily viewable, right? You have our connection with natural law, and there is the material law, there is the cosmic, and then you have the divine laws. And really, the viewable part of reality is really a small percentage of what's really out there, what's really all around us, right? And so I feel that the connection and the shift to the next more sustainable forms of co-creation and reality, some people call it the new paradigm, will have to involve a good number or deal of percentage of recognizing the unseen parts of what connects all of us and how we create, because it may appear the same, but if the energy is not the same, the intention is not the same, it looks benevolent, but it's really something else to control. Where we're going, we'll be able to see the intention and we can feel it. So where we're going, there's really no place to um to lie, cheat, or deceive another person, because we will, for the majority, that's not going to be able to last. It's not going to be sustainable. So again, the safeguards are important. The other aspect of this is to, before we can actually move on to the next operating system, so to speak. This is something that's been in different conversations, and it is the subject of atonement. and it's not necessarily the it doesn't necessarily mean a payment of some sort of like financial return or payment, so that they would be appeased from the generation of trauma. It's not that. It is actually something foundational that needs to be recognized, and I believe Dr. Melson has some really good insight on that one as well. I'd love for him to share.
I just wanted, my name is Gail, and Mr. Humphrey, I really resonated with something that you said that was really hit me. If I may, is that okay, Dr.
Sure.
Melson?
Oh, sure, sure.
Oh,
Because I don't want to interrupt. This is a very powerful conversation. You know, David and I have had, David Cam, because it's been David Gershon too. David Cam and I have had some amazing conversations over the years, okay? And Sherry Lewis and I and Mesfin, we've all had conversations. But something, Humphrey, that you said, I remember a woman who was very, very important to me. She's passed away now. She had a brain tumor. I'm actually sitting here with one of my colleagues who we've honored. Her name was Nicole, and she was one of these great strategists. But one of the things we used to talk about is value, okay? If my value, let's say David's value and my value were not the same, there would be a constant intentional arguing going back and forth. Because if one values money first and I value people first, let's say, and David valued people second and I valued money second, okay? The values don't align, okay? The foundational values don't align. They're in a different order. I'm not saying that that's what's happening, so I want to be clear. This is just an example. Um, and when those values don't align, you find yourself at odds with one another of creating something that's moving forward, and it actually gives birth even further to the controlling aspect that you talked about, Humphrey. A huge controlling aspect, because now one is ego driven and another is actually foundational driven. Now, when we talk about foundations, before we can get to the collective foundation, the building foundation of the organization, I want to go back to what something that really hits home for me is the individual foundation. You have to know your individual foundation, what's going on with you, your insecurities, be okay with your insecurities and your humanity. The last thing I just want to share in what you said, Humphrey, was the thing of, and Dr. Nelson said, which hit me like a bolt of lightning when Dr. Nelson said this, because see, we often talk, but we don't come about solutions. You said, Dr. Nelson, that good intentions don't always mean that that's the result, which fits in with what Humphrey said about the atonement. Atonement means, and this is what COVID, if people will take the opportunity to allow COVID and a lockdown to really be with yourself and deal with the atonement, not just of the traumas, as Humphrey was saying, but to deal with it and to move past it, not to go around it, but move through it so that you come out on the other side understanding oneself. It shouldn't take us 10 years to understand a lesson. Because if we have to take 10 years to understand that lesson, we're truly not getting what there is. And if we mismanage the chains, if we don't release the chains that bind us, we end up mismanaging any opportunities that come through our doors. Therefore, we cannot create that foundation that David was talking about. So it just hit me, those two things. Thank you.
right.
Thank you.
Rico, may I add just one more thing, just
Surely,
before,
surely.
because I do need to get off the camera shortly here. One thing that I saw that is, I foresaw that is going to be different this time around. If this is, the way, the new, ushering the new age, and I believe it is happening in our time, and I'll definitely share this in another, maybe during the conference, because it was a powerful vision, more, you know, really powerful vision, of things to come. But what I'd like to share, the way this future, um, changing of the operating system shifts, part of the intention that I foresaw when it comes to our leadership is that we are going to help each other succeed in the position that each individual holds, not to scrutinize to so that they can we can kick them out of that position, but as long as their feeling is called to be in that place, um, we're going to help each other reach the highest level of our whatever gift we're bringing into the planet, and we all have our differences and challenges and weaknesses and so forth, but we're not going to go that route, where somebody's demonized what they said, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's not that way. I foresaw that the way we're going to move forward is to really help each other, and we're going to get to that level of operating in the most harmonic level. We're going to get there together. There's no more master teacher student. We're really going to help each other reach that highest level of awareness together, from the food, from the reminders, sharing love, emanating wisdom, and caring for one another. The time has come when somebody feels like, okay, I'm ready to go fishing and I'm ready to step out of the position of becoming a president of this organization, or leading this group, then somebody else will step in, and I trust that the collective wisdom will know what to do next, and who's going to step in, who's going to step out. And it's there's no forcing. It's really very harmonic in that field. So
Okay,
thank
so
you.
let's wrap up the call, and then after we're gonna, of course, we're gonna continue, send out the invitation to continue this conversation. This is just an introduction
Right.
to the conversation. Before we go, do you have anything short to say, anyone of you?
Well, I think I should throw out a few words. I know we have to wrap up the call and all. Just to at least give a few more parameters, a little bit about what atonement really is, because unfortunately it is, there's a lot of presuppositions around the use of that word, and a lot of that is in need of correction. Reparations is not atonement, for example. Financial redistribution from guilt is not atonement. That is compensation. That's reparations. It is a political, economic kind of idea about restitution. True atonement, and I really piggybacking on some of Gail's comments, have to do with learning. Are you learning? Are you advancing? Is there a true understanding, a growing in knowledge and understanding, such as to have expanded awareness as it perpetuates further and propagates further in the field of collective consciousness of a society, of an individual, and even on a planetary scale? So the atonement processes are going to need to be examined, and they need to be also examined from the standpoint of what indigenous perspectives on atonement practices are as well. Those who have familiarity, for example, with the kahunas of Polynesia and what atonement work through the processes of things like Ho'oponopono, what that looks like. Those who have understandings from some of the Eastern spiritual traditions of what atonement looks like. Again, these things are primarily centered around expansion of love and the capacity to generate more and more compassion towards one another, towards the environment, and things of this sort. Secondarily, we would have the issue of material resource redistribution. Again, this is why I'd say Brother Humphrey was mentioning, if this is prior, this is why atonement is so important as a large dimension of this overall approach to safeguarding. Because without atonements, there will not be proper guidance of in the distribution process. Those who are simply looking from a standpoint, a perspective of it's time we got ours, because what they have done to us or against us for so long, and this type of process of reciprocating retribution is not going to be healing, and it's not going to be effective overall on a planetary scale. So we'll look at many of these kinds of things as well. I won't go much further into that other than simply to underscore that part of atonement also has to address the issue of warriorhood and the role of violence in the ascension of societies around the world. We have a tendency to overly romanticize our histories, and we tend to overvalue the warriorhood of our societies, our cultures, etc., without recognizing also that so much embedded in those histories are violations of spiritual laws, of cosmic laws, of divine laws, of humanitarian laws. Some of the great societies that we romanticize about today are built on genocide of their own people. There is a need for atonements even in these areas, insofar as the recognition, insofar as the acceptance of the responsibilities, insofar as the cultivation of a global universal compassion and approach. And this kind of accepting for the process of the learning, for the process of the coming together. This is why atonement, again, amongst so many other reasons to go much further into in the conference itself upcoming, why it is also necessary. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. So we will have another conference on just all those issues. So thank you so much, Dr. Melson. Thank you, Humphrey. Thank you, Gail, Alice, and everyone. And to all the three peacemakers, Mesfin Zaid and Sherry Lewis. I have to get off to make a phone call.
So thank you, everyone, on behalf of David and the three peacemakers. And David and all of us will create another opportunity to empower this conversation even further. And Humphrey, thank you. And Dr. Melson, thank you for your wise words. Yuko, Dr. Tanya Cabrito, and Charles Sharp Bima, we thank you for being a part of the crowd here to empower this space that is here. Everyone, we ask that you enjoy your day, and we are com26v.com out.
Much love.